Hello and welcome back to the course. So in the last sessions we already got in touch with string objects. And now we dig a bit deeper into the strings. However, also later in our real-world projects, our focus is not on strings, so we keep it here as short as possible. So at the end of the last session we transformed an integer 5 into a string by putting it into quotation marks. Let's repeat this again. So we are transforming the integer 5 to a string, and this completely changes the functionality of the object. So before 5 plus 2 gives 7, and now if we execute the string 5, so represented by C, plus 2, we get an error message. So it says it must be a string, not an integer, so it completely changes the functionality. But what are strings actually? Well, strings are a sequence of Unicode characters inside a quotation mark. And this is treated like any other sequence like lists or tuples, which we see later. And actually we can put into a string many different characters like numbers, letters, special characters like question marks and exclamation marks and so on, which we will see later. But before now, let's start with just assigning or creating a string object dog and assign the variable d. And also we create a string object cat and assign the variable e. And no surprise if we print the types of d and e, both are strings. And if we try to add both strings, as before we try to apply the plus operator, let's see what we get here. So what Python does, it just concatenates both strings. So d plus e gives dog cat. And if we add e plus d, we get cat dog. So it's just concatenating both strings. And if we try to subtract, we get an error message. So the minus operator is not defined for strings. And if we try to multiply two strings, we also get an error message. And if we try to add, let's say, an integer to a string, there's also an error message. It doesn't work. But if we transform our integer 5 into a string, then of course we can add this string to another string like cat or dog. So we get dog 5. And it works also the other way around. So we get 5 dog. And if we try to multiply a string with an integer like 5, we get a string with 5 times the copy of dog. So we get dog, 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 dog. So d is dog, and times 5 is just concatenating 5 times dog. And we can also do it the other way around and get the same result. So it doesn't matter if d times 5 or 5 times d. However, if we transform the integer 5 to a string and try to multiply it with our string d, of course we get an error message. And also we can concatenate many strings to one string. So for example, we have the string I, we have the string have, the string 5, and the string dogs and dot. We get the statement I have 5 dogs. So as you can see here, we need the empty spaces here. If we forget these, our sentence or our statement looks a little bit unreadable. So Python can also handle spaces here. And spaces can be part of a string, so that's quite comfortable here. What I would like to introduce here is string formatting. So we are assigning the string dogs to the variable animal and the integer 6 to amount. And then we print the statement I have curly brackets, dot, end of the quotes. And then I apply to the string the method format, and inside the brackets of format I'm defining for which the curly brackets are placeholders. So and if I execute the cell here, I have 5 dogs. So what the method .format actually does is it fills the placeholders in the sequence as defined within the brackets here. So the first curly bracket will be replaced by the amount, and the second curly bracket will be replaced by animal. And yeah, for example, so yesterday I had 6 dogs. Now today I have not dogs but cats, and not 6 but let's say 8. And I update it, I have 8 cats. And this is quite helpful actually if yeah, your variables are changing many times and you want to automate your statement how many cats or dogs you have currently. So that's quite helpful here. What you can also do, you can delete a whole string by calling the del function. So inside the brackets you put the object d, so d stands for dog, and if you delete it, so if you then try to print d, so d is not defined here, it says. So now we have to redefine d again. And now d is again dog. Before I mentioned that a string is a sequence of Unicode characters. And yeah, by calling the len function, you can count the numbers of items in a string. So with D, we would expect 3 items, D, O, and G. Alright, and we can also count the number of items or the number of characters in statement. It's 14, so let's go back to our statement. So our statement is I have 5 dogs. So when we count, we have to count actually all characters, so also the space characters. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and also the dot 14 characters. So that's correct here. And before we said different data types have different functionality. So we could call the length function on strings, but we cannot call the length function on integers or floats. If we try to do so, we get an error message. So object type integer has no length function, or the length function is not defined. And earlier we saw that integers and floats, they have built-in methods or attributes. And this holds also true for string objects. So string objects also have predefined or built-in methods and attributes. And one of this is the upper method. And let's execute the upper method on our string object statement. And let's print statement. And there you can see all items or all characters are converted to uppercase. So what actually the upper method does, it just, yeah, it converts all characters to the uppercase. And we can also call the opposite method, dot lower. If we do so, we get I have dogs, and here we can see all characters are, yeah, lowercase. And there's another method called capitalize, and if we call this method on statement, we get I have dogs, but the I here you see is capitalized. So the first character in our string is capitalized with the capitalized method. And there are many more built-in methods for string objects. And if you like, you can look at the documentation or just press here .tab to see what Python offers here. And yeah, you can just try out what happens if you call the methods and attributes here. But for now we are finished here with the strings, and we head over to lists, and there's a function called list which transforms a string object into a list. So we can try what happens here. So our statement is I have 5 dogs, and we transform it into a list. And what we can see here, we have all single characters separated by a comma inside square brackets. And this is called a list. So if we check the type L, this is a list. And in the next lesson, we will have a deeper look to the list object. But so for the time being, this is it. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next lesson.